Okay. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us on Friday afternoon. I know there's lots of people looking forward to the weekend and probably hopefully, you're enjoying a beer there on a Friday afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our Lawn Legend webinar. This is first of our series of webinars, so it's pretty exciting for us to kick these off, and we're really looking forward to hoping that they help lawn lovers like yourselves out there, and you get the best information, and you can have a great season ahead. Hopefully, some of this rainfall dries up, and we can see some really great lawns this spring and summer. Just to kick off, I thought I should introduce myself. For those who don't know me, my name is Ian Thompson. I've been greenkeeping since I left school back in 2003. So working primarily at golf courses in Sydney and in Melbourne. Did a master's degree at Sydney University back in 2012 it was. Done some product development for some of household brand names over the years. And back in 2021, I joined the Green Shed and Living Turf to start up this business, the Lawn Shed, and have been supporting customers get the best lawns in the street for the last few years. But joining me today to help with the presentation is Michael Bradbury. He's the technical lead for Syngenta. He's been a superintendent at a number of top class facility golf courses around Australia. Was voted 2013 Superintendent of the Year. Back then when he was doing the redevelopment of Manly Golf Club. And he also has a master's degree from Sydney University. So welcome, Mick. Anything you want to add to your resume there?
Hi, everyone. Hopefully it stops raining soon.
Okay. Short and sweet. Okay, so just quickly on the agenda, so Mick's probably going to present the first half of it in a lot of detail. I'm going to cover some of the things at the end. So Mick will cover pre-emergence, PGRs, plant growth regulators, if you're not familiar with them. I'll cover granular and liquid fertilizers, nitrogen calculations, very short spill on what MLSN is, some programming, and because it's a primary topic at the moment, just a quick slide on what you can do around rainfall. So Mick, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Right, pre-emergence. Hopefully you've had some awareness of pre-emergence. Obviously a great tool in managing weeds. Broadleaf weeds, obviously something that we can do a bit about through winter, but your summer grass weeds are a big problem. Certainly if you're trying to control things like crow's foot and summer grass in kikuyu or buffalo lawns, you've got a real headache. So pre-emergence is definitely the go. Broadly, there's two types of pre-emergence on the market. Those that work on the emerging root of the weed seedling. You can see my little seedling down there, that first seminal root. So the majority of the pre-emergent herbicides will work by being taken up by those initial roots from the weed seedling, and that's how they control the emerging weed. There are a small group of some other pre-emergents that work on the emerging leaf, the first leaf of the seedlings. They're generally termed a little bit softer on the turf, on your established turf, compared to those that work on the roots. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So yeah, taken up by the emerging weed, not to be used on new or weak turf. So really it's for lawns that are well established, have a good deep root system, not necessarily recovering from wear and tear, like you might see on a council goldmouth oval coming out of winter. So once you've got that root system nice and well established, your lawn's in good nick, that's when your pre-emergents are best used. They bind to the top sort of 10 to 15 millimeters of soil when they're watered in, and that's where they bind strongly. certainly be a problem applying them at the moment with saturated soils. So you need to have that soil conducive to take it in. So it needs to be well drained. And then once watered in, it needs a few days of drying to bind to the soil particles, where it will stay and work on those weed seedlings as they emerge up to the next 6 months, certainly with Barricade. A few different, as I mentioned, there's a few different products available. They have sort of different features, but Barricade certainly is one of the best and a key component of professional turf pre-emergent programs, been used in professional turf for probably 20 or 30 years and still used regularly on sporting facilities around Australia on an annual or biannual basis. So over application, as I mentioned, is an issue. So you don't want to over apply. So uniform application is really important, and using the right amounts. Generally, for most people, that'll be 1 or 2 applications a year, should cover most of your issues, but getting that application uniform's critical. Weed seed banks, so things like Poa annua and other weed seeds that blow in, depending on your situations, or wash in floodwater, they can remain viable in the soil for many, many years. So they simply need maybe a bit of sunlight, bit of damage or exposure. So just controlling the weeds that are there now doesn't always resolve the problem. So that's one of the benefits of the pre-emergence. If you've got that weed seed bank sitting there viable for a long time, it's going to keep coming up. So that's why these pre-emergents are an important part of your control. So very effective on those summer grass weeds, also on winter grass. Should control the majority of broadleaf weeds through winter, but you may still get some broadleaf, but certainly nowhere near the amounts you would typically get without using a pre-emergent. Next, please. So a few examples there: winter grass, crow's foot, summer grass, love grass, Parramatta grass, all clumping, very disturbing of the surface and not good to look at. Overshadow or shade out the understory species. Just unsightly. So this is a bit of a weather chart. I grabbed this off the Syngenta website. You can put in your location, look at your historic rainfall for any period, maximum, minimum temperature, and what I've got focused on the arrows there is the soil temperature. So generally, summer weeds like crow's foot and summer grass will start germinating around 15 to 18 degrees soil temperature. So you can see in this example here for Sydney, it's around mid-August through till the start of October. So somewhere sort of mid-August into the start of October, 15 to 18 degrees soil temperature. So you would need the product in the ground prior to that. So, around early September would be ideal for those summer weeds. And then winter grass, generally coming out of summer, once that soil temperature drops down to 21 degrees, you'll start getting some emergence from then onwards. Really, with some rainfall around March and April, you'll get your bulk of your germination of your winter grass. So just a couple of key times and soil temperatures to keep an eye on for your location, because obviously it varies depending on where you are in Australia. Just to look at the labels, so Barricade, it's free from poison scheduling, but still, always read your safety instructions. Active ingredient prodiamine, very good product, so long lasting. So all applied well should most situations give you up to 6 months control of your weeds. There's a few do nots there. So turf under stress, newly seeded, new laid turf, which we've talked about. They don't have a developed root system. So you need that root system and the turf to be established well, because when this gets on and sits in that top 10 to 15 millimetres of soil, it will have some impact on the roots of the established turf. But when that's a small portion of the overall root system of that turf, so you shouldn't see any negative impacts on the established turf. But that's just the way the product works on that weed root system. Do not apply it with heavy rains forecasts, because it's not going to move into the soil. It's not going to bind with that soil because the soil's waterlogged, as we're currently experiencing. Do not irrigate to the point of runoff within 3 days. So the idea is your soil's conducive to application, you water it in, it sits in that top 10 to 15 millimetres, and then you get a few days of drying to follow your application and incorporation. And while the soil's drying and draining and the plant's using the water, that active ingredient is binding to the soil particles, where it'll stay and release a small amount over the next 6 months to work on those weed seedlings. Do not apply over garden beds over the top of mulch. Do not apply recently repotted. So same thing in your garden beds. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but yeah, no newly planted or seedlings of pots or annuals. You need plants in your garden that are perennial or well-established root systems. Okay, just some approximate timing for your barricade. So I talked about soil temperature, which can vary from the coast to inland, but if you have a look at this map or snap a photo, you can see for Sydney, we're talking about, for our summer weeds, sort of late August into September. And then for winter weeds like Pomerania, early March. So varies north and south. Look at the label. So you've got quite a few grasses covered on the label that you can use it on. All the warm season grasses, and you've got some of your common weeds on the label that it will cover. And also for your garden beds there, you can see the weeds listed on that, so quite an extensive list. So in garden beds, there's a good example of what that 10 to 15 mil barrier I talked about. So generally sort of perennial gardens of established plants. You can spray it straight over the top of these plants and water it in to get it to that top 10 to 15 mils where it binds, and then any weeds that are in that barrier there will be controlled by the product, but not suitable if you've putting in annuals or you put in tube stock, the juvenile, you wouldn't treat those areas. If you had treated those areas and you wanted to put in some tube stock or new plants, you would have to just remove some of that top part of that soil and discard it somewhere else and have some fresh soil to put in those areas if you're replacing plants. So minimising weeds for up to 6 months control. So as I mentioned, free from poison scheduling. Aim for around 15 to 18 degrees soil temperature for your summer grass weeds, as I mentioned. Excellent on lawns and gardens. I've been using it myself for my lawns and gardens for years, and obviously, I used a lot of this product on the golf course over our time, trying to manage both summer and winter grass weeds. On turf, there's a bit of flexibility with the wash-in, so you can apply it and water it in within those first 7 days, but that doesn't extend to the gardens. In the gardens, you really want to get it off the leaf of the existing plants in the garden and get it into that soil as quick as you can. And like I said, it needs to bind to that soil. So example, if you're getting rain forecast for the coming week, you wouldn't put it out if there was rain forecast day after day, because it needs those few days of drying to bind. And it comes in the 250 ml dual chamber pack that we use for our home garden products. So easy to to measure out what you need without having to pour it into another container and wash up.
Quickly on the barricade there, Mick. One of the things on the label is 10 to 40 mils per 100 square meters. What rate do you recommend?
I say start with 20 to 30 for home gardens. Generally, if most situations you haven't used it before or a lot of it, so you should get a good result out of that 20 to 30 mils. And then in the garden beds, it's 40 to 80 mils. You need a high amount for controlling the gardens.
Yeah, cool. I was just wondering because I usually recommend the same 20 to 30. We used to use 2.5 litres a hectare on the golf course, and that's the equivalent to 25 mils, and that worked great. So, yeah, cool. All right.
So PGRs, plant growth regulators. I'm sure some of you are already using a form of Trinexapac on your lawns. Fantastic product, really changed the world of managing Kikuyu on a golf course back in my day, as opposed to mowing it till it was white and then sharpening the mower and doing it again. This really brought Kikuyu into some really good condition. So Primo HG is a home garden. It's the only Trinexapac registered for home gardens, which will be available very shortly. Once again, in the 500ml twin chamber pack, so don't need to pour it into a cup to measure it out. Nice and easy to use. Got a caution label, so check the safety requirements before applying, as always, and apply safely. So how it works. So Primo is taken in through the leaf and the crown of the plant and basically moves down to the growing point between the leaf and upper roots and the root system, the growing point between, and then it works on the gibberellic acid. And gibberellic acid is responsible for the elongation of cells, whether it be stem cells or leaf cells, and it creates that reduction in the size of those cells. So you can see a great example on the left there, the treated compared to untreated. So just everything is shortened up, reduces that leaf growth and stem growth and vertical growth, and hence the various benefits that channel from that. So your plant's still operating healthily, but that excess energy that would be put into excessive leaf growth, particularly in summer, is transferred into lateral growth and root growth. So basically, the plant's using its water and nutrients far more efficiently than it would without that regulation. Next. So a couple of good shots there. So talking about Kikuyu, under suppression there on that photo on the left. Nice and tight. You would never get that out of Kikuyu without Primo. And then an example on the left with the cooch. You can see that just shortening of the internodes, smaller, tighter leaves. So finer leaf surface, reduced stolon length, increased tillering in some of your plants, increased density of the surface, deeper, larger root system, and improved colour. So generally the density of the turf is much more wear resistant as well. So a couple of good examples here. This is just some lines on a cooch field up in Queensland where they've put some Primo in when they've sprayed the lines, and you can see the growth of the seed head and growth of the leaf. So if you've never used it before and you're going away on leave, you can see on that right-hand photo the benefits there, coming back from leave and have to scalp that turf down. And that's one of the big problems in summer is scalping your turf, the damage you're doing, the susceptibility to disease. You get wet weather like this in midsummer and you can't get your mower on there and you're just doing damage. So having that control of how much leaf growth you want is a great asset, and really dialing the rates up and down to meet the growth requirements that you like is something you can do. So yes, benefits are really widespread to the plant. Affects the elevated levels of cytokinins in the plant. So you see improved stress tolerance for various reasons, including your increased root system, greater concentrations of chlorophyll from the higher photosynthetic rate, because you've got more surface area of that smaller, denser leaves than you would have had. Increased plant carbohydrates up to 40% in shaded areas. So you've got shaded areas, low rates of this can assist the plants. A lot of warm season turf will try and elongate and grow up to compensate for that lack of light. And you keep mowing it and removing that plant material, and eventually it exhausts the nutrients and the carbohydrates in the plant down to nothing, and it'll just thin out. So the Primo can really help plants tolerate that shade better. So you'll see better colour, less water use, better drought and stress tolerance, particularly in summer in the heat. So just a couple of examples of the roots. It's not the best photos, but this is some young ryegrass turf that's been planted, treated with Primo, and you can see quite easily the benefits to the root system in the treated species, treated plots there. But yeah, I mean, that energy that would be excessively going into upward growth through midsummer is being redirected. So you're getting very efficient use of your nutrients and water, and a much stronger, robust plant. So just to sum up those benefits: drought tolerance, less water loss, improved density, increased wear tolerance, improved tensile strength. For councils conditioning their warm season turf over summer, they may oversow or not oversow with cool season grasses to get through winter wear. But, Primo builds that density and that tensile strength that creates the strength and stability and understory for those sporting surfaces to get through winter. Line marking, better fungicide longevity, so things you're applying on the leaf you're not mowing off, so they're going to last longer. Shade tolerance and improved colour. Growing degree days, if you're interested, this is the go to take it to the next level. So growing degree days is basically a measure of the heat accumulation. The easiest way to work it out is just to take your minimum and maximum temperature, divide it by 2, and that's an accumulation of growth for the day. And you can work out basically how long your Primo is going to last through summer. So generally we start at sort of about 200 to 300 growing degree hours, and then you'll accumulate what's generating every day, whether it be 10 to 20 growing degree hours. And then once you reach that point of sort of 250, 300, depending on your turf species and other conditions, it gives you an indication of when to apply so you don't get a rebound. So you can see in this diagram on the left, you've got a suppression stage where, Primo has been applied. You've got a period of time where it's suppressing the plant, but if it's allowed to come out of its regulation, it's been storing carbohydrates in the plant. You've got this better established root system. So you can get this rebound or burst of energy from the plant, and you'll get this massive growth burst when it comes out of regulation. It doesn't apply all the time to all species, but it is quite typically true. So certainly for turf managers, they'll keep a measure of their growing degree days, knowing when it's going to run out, and then they can reapply and keep it under suppression to avoid getting excessive clippings and wounding of the plant. By scanning the QR code on the top right of the screen, you can go to the GDD calculator on the Syngenta website, and we'll look at that a bit more closely on the next slide. So this is what it looks like. You can put in your location. Base temperature for warm season grasses is always 10 degrees C. If you've got cool season grasses, it'd be 0. But it'll give you the accumulated GDD for your location. So if you applied Primo today, you could go in and you can set a warning, a threshold, put your date in, say you applied it. You need to sort of set a target. So you might say 200 or 250. So this time of year, that's probably going to be about a month you would get out of that. And obviously, as the days get longer into summer, those periods get shorter between your applications. But yes, recommended something to have a look at. It gives you that your cumulative, what your GDD is on a daily basis. Once you set that starting point when you've treated, it gives you the cumulative GDD as it builds up, and then you can see where you're at for your location. And if you want, you can set thresholds. So you'll get an email when it's time to 80% or 90% of your target. So it's something you just have a play around with. Keep an eye on your lawn when it starts to look like it's going to burst into extra growth. That might be the time to reapply. You can look at what that GDD had accumulated to at that point, and that might gives you a point or a measure to play with, whether it's 250 or 300. Depends on the species and depends on your location. I think that's about it. So plant growth regulators, so they come for hedges as well. So different active, paclobutrazole is the active intrimate growth regulator, but certainly a good product if you have to do a lot of hedging. It can help keep your hedges in shape. So if you'd like to be using the hedger less over summer and you've got hedges, this is a great product I can recommend because I've been using it for quite a few years on my hedges.
Yeah, my Moreas are always filling up my green bin, so this has worked well for me, Mick.
Yeah. Yep. So you can get tighter, better looking hedges, improve flowering, less green waste for disposal, reduce required labour for less trimming, less risk management, less climbing up a ladder if you need to, or using equipment, saves time and money. So the way the product works is it's applied to the soil under the hedges. You need to get it under that drip line to under the hedge, and then it's taken up by the growing point of the plant. So really, once your hedges are looking exactly how you want them, you might have had 1 or 2 trims in spring to get them, where you want them. So once they're ideal looking, that's when you would apply. And then over the next sort of 4 to 6 weeks, as the plant takes it up through the soil, it goes up and is stored in the growing point of the plant, the growing tips. So those growing tips of the hedge need to be intact. So you might need to make sure if you've done a bit of trimming and you've cut some of those growing tips off, they've been allowed to regenerate, and then you've tidied it up over a few weeks or a month and get it to that point where it's exactly where you want it. And then it's stored in the growing tips of the plant. And then once again, similar to the Primo, everything's reduced. So you've got reduced stem length, tighter, smaller leaves, better colour, which you'll see in some of the coming slides. So that was a trial done on a hedge. You can see the untreated on the right, shooting up some elongated growth compared to the treated section over there on the left. So that's what it does for you. Still might need some very light trimming, but instead of cutting long sort of stems off, it's just, the odd much less material, or just sort of touching up a few leaves. so to speak. So this is a couple of pots. You should be able to see, yeah, the one on the left is tighter. The shoots are much shorter, sort of more like a rounded bun compared to the one on the right, where you can see that really elongated stems are shooting up, giving a much more open growth habit. So it's a great example. This one as well. So you can see the plant on the left, it's been treated, it's taken up that active, stored it in the apical growing point of the plant, and you can see the impact there. It's really reduced the stem growth, increased the leaf amount of leaves and the density and colour of those leaves compared to the one on the right, which wasn't treated.
Okay. Well, thanks,
Okay.
Mick. That was very good and nicely presented. So, yeah, thanks for that. So Mick's obviously covered a lot of those things in detail. I'm going to run through a few things in fertilisers. No doubt you guys will have some questions about what Mick's presented and what I've presented today. At the end, I'll provide my email address and phone number if you want to have a discussion about anything we've covered. So feel free to reach out to us, but I'll provide those details at the end. I'm going to jump into a quick overview of granular and liquid fertilisers. So for those that don't know, obviously granular is taken in by the roots through soil water. I know it sounds simple, but it's often forgotten. We put our granular fertilizers out, and then we just leave them. What we actually need to do is keep moisture levels good, because that's where the nutrition is actually being brought up. So often we put them out, we water them in, and we think that's enough, but we need to keep those moisture levels high for a little bit longer. Wetting agent is something that is really good, as we were talking about just there, moisture movement into the soil. As the moisture moves into the soil, it's taking that nutrition with it. So if you've got moisture moving laterally across or moving sideways, that nutrition isn't going where it is. It's the same if you're applying Barricade or a Aceleprint, any of those products that you want to get down into the soil. Wetting agent is key to make sure that you get that good distribution. So really good thing to get out in early in the season before you start with your Barricade, your Aceleprint, and even your granular fertilisers. Granular fertilisers uptake will be slow if the plant's roots are weak or soil temperatures are low. So one of the things we often see, or one of the things you're tempted to do, I guess, if your lawn's really unhealthy, is to get out there with a granular fertiliser and give it a big hit. But obviously, if you can imagine that plant isn't functioning great, its roots are a little bit not productive, not as good as they should be. Their ability to take up those nutrients are a lot diminished, to say the least. And then obviously when soil temperatures are low, so nitrogen goes through what's called a nitrogen cycle. There's bacteria that breaks them down. Nitrosomonas and Nitrobacter are the bacteria that break it into plant available forms. And they're not active at very low temperatures. So that's where liquid fertilisers are much better for the plant. But as we're coming up to spring, granular fertilisers have a lot of advantages. And one of the things we like to talk about is controlled release fertilisers. We don't want something that's just going to basically give us that much growth that we're putting out high rates of primo and we're fighting ourselves here. So having a controlled release fertilizer means less peaks and troughs. So we don't have, grass that's growing super quickly and then you're scalping it and then it's got no nutrition to recover itself. So that's where controlled release fertilizer comes in. And granular is key to providing a base feed. Big fan of liquids myself, but I like to put out a couple of granular feeds a year that I guess create that base nutrition. You see here in just some of those images about what I was talking about, that turf growth response. So on the top one, you've got that peak of growth down into a trough where it's low in nutrition, and then the controlled release fertilizer below that. In terms of liquid, primarily absorbed by the leaf. That's why you don't water it in. If you do get some rain afterwards, that nutrition is still nutrition and will still be drawn up by the roots. Just won't be used as quickly. If you are putting out liquid nutrition, make sure you learn how to use your sprayer, so calibrate it. We've got some great videos online on our YouTube channel called Lawn Flicks. So make sure you calibrate your sprayer and get those out. If you are using a fertilizer with a high iron content, we've got one that's got 10% iron in it, Lawn Play Enhance. It's a very high level of iron, which is great. But when you start that, you want to start at the lower rate. So it's 200 to 500 mils per 100 square meters, starting at that lower rate, just so you don't get a bit of oranging. And depending on temperatures, you may even get a bit of blackening with that if you go out at the high rate, just shocks the plant too much. So start with those lower rates. In terms of picking a liquid or a granular, seasonal relevance is very important. As I was mentioning, the granulars aren't broken down in that nitrogen cycle by the bacteria and things like that. So what we want to see is liquids at that time of the year. So you'll get more bang for your buck with liquids. Granulars might get washed away in the rainfall that we're getting at the moment, for example. And liquid fertilizer is another one that's good as you start to, even though we're looking at controlled release fertilizer, you can see there is still a small trough there. So using a liquid just towards the end of that period, for example, if you've got a fertilizer that lasts for 8 to 10 weeks, from that 6 to 10 week period, you might be looking at putting a liquid on. Best results is a combination of both. So both of them have a place in your lawn care program. Just a quick plug, and I won't go into too much of the plugging, but obviously wanted to talk about a couple of our fertilizers just so we can talk about what they offer. So MP Spectrum, this is a 20 kilo bag that's from our Professional Living Turf brand, brought into the lawn shed for homeowners. 300 SGN. What SGN stands for is size granular number. All that means is 300 SGN is a 3 mil prill on average. So you might get some smaller ones, might get some bigger ones. That's got trace elements, carbon, beneficial microbes, and at a 2 kilo rate, you're looking at $5.50 per 100 square meters. So very economical. We've got another one there, Cooch Master, 23% nitrogen. That one, 70% of that nitrogen is UMAX, so that's a controlled release methylene urea based fertilizer, 200 SGN, so it's down to 2 mil. So this one was more designed for cooch fairways, cooch tees, those sorts of things on a golf course. So good controlled release fertilizer with extra iron, magnesium and manganese, all greening elements, try and get that nice golf course green. That's one that if you apply to dry foliage can actually be left and then just watered in whenever you get round to it. Lawn Play Enhance is a liquid, has stabilized nitrogen and iron, high percentage of iron, as I mentioned earlier, rapid greening, organic acid for chelation. So not all nitrogen and iron products are created the same. So obviously, we'll cover it a little bit later when we start to talk about nitrogen calculations and uptake ratios. But essentially, you can't just feed a lawn with just iron. It needs nitrogen to actually uptake that iron, and it does actually need some organic acid in that mix because iron is a heavy metal and it needs that organic acid chelation. So yeah, a lot of our products that we make, you can apply and get results rather than having to add 2 or 3 together generally. If you are looking to buy a granular fertilizer for spring, we are giving away our Bush Ranger mower to someone. Hopefully someone on this call. So yeah, in August, if you buy a granular fertilizer, you're in the draw to enter. So it's simple. So nitrogen calculations, it's an interesting question that I've had with homeowners. Not a lot of people do calculate their nitrogen, but it is something that's extremely common in the professional industry. The reason being, nitrogen is the driver of uptake of all the other nutrients in the soil. So if you're looking here, we've got the nitrogen being applied, we've got organic nitrogen being broken down in the soil, and you've got other elements as a percentage of those. So I'm not sure if you can quite see it there, but basically for every, basically it's 10% of a maintenance fertilizer would be 10% nitrogen, what have we got? 6% potassium and 1% phosphorus. So a 10-1-6 type mix would be a normal maintenance fertiliser for uptake. So monitoring nitrogen, why is it important? Obviously, nitrogen is the main driver for leaf growth. Lots of, as Mick has already covered as well, scalping leads to lots of things, lots of issues with disease. You're putting your higher plant growth regulator rates up if you're increasing lots of leaf growth, lots of mowing, and then obviously all that leaf, you're adding thatch, and thatch is where disease and insects live. So lots of issues with putting on too much nitrogen. So obviously, how do we know if we're putting on enough nitrogen or not enough nitrogen? So just showing here how you would calculate nitrogen. So for example, if you're using a 2 kilos of a fertilizer over 100 square meters, and that fertilizer contains 20% nitrogen, that would be 2,000, because we're talking grams, times 0.2. That's the 20%. So you'd be applying 400 grams of nitrogen per 100 square meters. Compare that with a liquid. Obviously, when we talk about liquids, we're putting less on more frequently. So 200 mils, for example, of a 20% liquid, you're looking at 200 times 0.2. You're looking at 40 grams of nitrogen per 100 square meters. Now, how much to use per year? Look, it does differ by grasses. There's an annual usage recommendation, 2 kilos per N per 100 square meters is a guide. Obviously, if you're using something like kikuyu, it might be slightly higher because it's a very hungry grass because it's always growing so actively. Whereas something like zoysia, which isn't growing very quick, can be down as low as 1 kilo of nitrogen per 100 square meters. So definitely something to look at, and you might even find that you'll reduce your fertilizer cost over the year. Definitely something to work out. And then again, of course, if you're looking at 400 grams of nitrogen in the one application, something to consider. If that's being released over a 2-month or a 1-month period, then you're back in again with another application of that product. You can quite quickly add up, and that's when we're starting to see those peaks and troughs. So you want to look at releasing that 400 grams. It's about a fifth of your program, so it should be about a fifth of the year, or a fifth of the growing season, I should say, not a fifth of the year. Just thought I'd provide something here from our professional market. This is actually a golf course green where they've calculated N, because calculating nitrogen is very common practice, as I mentioned, in the professional business. Here, the customer's using MP Carbon Green, which is a renovation fertiliser. They're doing a rate of, it's 320 kilos per hectare, which is 3.2 kilos per 100 square metres. They're doing that twice a year at spring and autumn renovations, and that's giving them 580 grams of nitrogen. It's 58 kilos because they're working in hectares, but it's 580 grams of nitrogen per year. You can see there, they're only running at 1.23 kilos of nitrogen. And one of the reasons they might be running that low is a couple of reasons, really. First, they could be chasing firm, fast, really aggressive green speed, depending on the golf course. They also might have a very organic soil, lots of thatch that they're looking to break down and use as the nitrogen source in that profile as well. So lots of things to take into account when you're calculating in nitrogen, but something to show that you can run it lean and mean and still have a really good looking grass, especially with things like Primo Max and Enhance to bring that green colour out of your lawn. It's all circling everything for me. Just quickly, I wanted to touch on MLSN. Reason being is I've had quite obviously this time of year, a lot of soil testing going on, and I've had a few come across my desk, and I guess what we've seen is a lot of interpretation using an old agricultural method called SLAM. So what MLSN is it's a really new way of interpreting soil tests. What it refers to is minimum levels of sustainable nutrition. So it came out in 2016 by a guy named Micah Woods. And the reason being is something didn't add up for a lot of people. And I look back on my greenkeeping career, and I remember I was about third year in TAFE, and one of the projects we had to do was look at a soil test and interpret the soil test. And I look back and think about conversation that I recall having with the superintendent saying, this doesn't make sense. We've got this and we've got this issue and we need to put heaps of this on and things like that. Why aren't you doing it? And his response was, the greens are great. Don't need to change anything. And at the time I thought, well, that was a really weird response. But looking back at it now and looking at some of the things that we know as the I guess the industry has evolved with a lot more scientific research, and particularly with MLSN, what we found is that some of those things were not true. Some of those soil test results weren't really showing what was possible. So they were using agricultural methods. So what MLSN did is they actually took thousands of soil tests of high-performing turf. So they went out there and looked at all these golf course greens and said, well, these are doing great, but they don't line up with the SLAM method of measuring nutrition in soil. So after they did all those soil tests, they looked at high-performing turf and they came back with a new set of recommendations on different levels, in particular phosphorus and potassium and calcium levels in soil. So if you are doing a soil test this year, I highly recommend just having a look into what MLSN is and how new it is to the industry and what it can offer, because you will be using less fertilizer and you will have it's better for the environment and cheaper for you. So definitely something to have a look at this season if you're doing soil tests. Next thing I was going to cover is just having a look at a lawn care program. So trying to talk about some of the key elements that you'd add to a lawn care program. Obviously, Mick has covered some of them, and I'll just quickly cover them. So look, if you're doing broadleaf weed treatments, so your Bindi, clover, all those sorts of things, now's the time to be doing them. Reason being they are actively growing, so they will take up the herbicide. There's no risk there. And you want to get out there before they start seeding. So obviously, if we wait till mid-September, by then the soil temperature's warmed up, they're pre-programmed. A lot of them are winter annuals, so they'll start throwing seeds, and you'll have a lot more weeds next year. Unless you put down barricade, of course. Right, Mick? So pre-emergent, as Mick mentioned, the 2 times, I think he had a really great slide there with the picture of Australia, August, September, depending on where you are. August at the top of the country, September anywhere from Sydney, Perth downwards, and then again in February, March with those soil temperatures. The one coming up is for summer grass weeds, and then February, March for winter grass weeds like wintergrass. And one of the things with wintergrass is it's a prolific seeder. Actually, all these annual grasses are, but wintergrass in particular. So if you've got some this year, you're going to have a lot more next year because it produces thousands of seeds. So if you think it's bad this year, make sure you get on a pre-emergent because it'll be a lot worse next year. Insecticide, looking at Acelepryn is the one that we highly recommend. And I'm sure most people are familiar with it. It's a great product. Getting that out in August if you're in the top end of the country, and then as early as you can in September for the rest of the country. Very critical to get those beetle larvae, so your African black beetle and your bilge bug. Then if you're in an area that is prone to armyworm, which is basically the top half of the country and growing every year, and it will be a bumper season for these because any rain in the top end of Australia at this time of the year generally brings a much larger infestation of armyworm. So we're in for a bumper season. So January, February, either monitor or apply Acelepryn to protect. So you get about 4 to 5 months out of Acelepryn against armyworm. Wetting agent, as I sort of covered, wetting agents are crucial in not just helping your soils from drying out and things like that, but actually getting those products in to where you apply them. So very important. if you've got as I said, their soils vary. So if you've got a if you've got a sandy soil, it's more likely to become hydrophobic than something that has, a peatier type organics type soil. So, you might need to be applying more regularly depending on your soil. Good tip is get out there with a hose. If the water doesn't go in, apply a wetting agent. September through to March, there's no reason you can't apply well into sort of towards winter and throughout the season. Granular fertilizer, 8 to 12 weeks apart. It really depends on what fertilizer you're using. Some of them are more controlled release. As you saw, the Cooch Master's very high percentage of Umax or methylene urea. So that does last for a long time, depending on how often you're using liquids. I definitely recommend a spring and an autumn application. Summer is good if you want to keep your base up. But a lot of people, I'd imagine, particularly in this group, prefer to use liquids and just spoon feed during summer. But spring and autumn are key. Spring because you create a nice base nutrition in your fertilizer program, which you can then use your liquids from. And again, in autumn, particularly if you have a warm season grass. So warm season grasses obviously start to go into dormancy, but this granular in autumn can help prolong that growing period, help it greener through winter, and a lot of that nutrition, if it isn't used, particularly through the plant, it gets stored in the rhizomes and the roots of the plant. And so what happens is then when you get a few warm days in late winter, early spring, you'll actually start to get growth. So or an autumn application actually helps early spring green up. Liquid fertilizers, as I mentioned, trying to get rid of those peaks and troughs that you might see with a granular. So in between, using things like Lawn Play Enhance to give that extra greening. You shouldn't need to be applying liquids within a few weeks of your granulars. Your granulars should be doing their job for you. Otherwise, change granular. But yeah, towards the end of the period of growth that you get from your granular fertilizer is when you can be using those liquids. Obviously, as mentioned, we get that microbe slowing down in winter, so using a liquid fertilizer there to keep the green is a good option. And again, early spring, as you start to get a few warm days, it's not quite ready to put a granular on, but a liquid feed is a good option there. Plant growth regulators. I once heard someone say to me, every month with an R in it. Is a good one, and it stuck in my head, and I thought that was a really easy way to remember it. But essentially, it's September through to April, and you vary the rates as the season dictates, as Mick mentioned. So yeah, that was going to be the end of the presentation, but I thought given the last week of rain, particularly along the East Coast, I thought I'd just quickly do a little discussion on it. So if you are dealing with a lot of rainfall, it is important to sort of monitor for fungus. So we're starting to get to that period where we'll get a lot of leaf spots. That's just due to prolonged leaf wetness. So what that means is basically the leaves are wet for the entire day rather than drying out. Usually at this time of year, we'd have some heavy dews and we'd start to see some disease anyway. After rainfall, you tend to get two types of diseases with both leaf spots. The first one being dollar spot. That tends to happen on lawns that are low in nutrition. So if you are seeing dollar spot, you can treat with a fungicide, or as it starts to dry out, you can fertilise it and it'll tend to fill in anyway. The other one is Dreschflora, which is generally more ones where there's lots of shade and generally excess nutrition as well. So that one's a little bit harder. That one's a little bit faster spreading and a little bit uglier, and certainly something you'd be looking to treat with a fungicide once it dries out. Obviously, we've got a lot of rain around, so as Mick was saying, don't apply a product allowing the water to allowing the rain to water it in. You're going to end up with product washing away, product not getting to the site that it's supposed to be, And then, obviously you'll sort of be going, this product hasn't worked in this location, and it might simply because it's all ended up pooling down the bottom of your yard rather than at the top. Wait for soil temperatures to rise before adding fertilizer. Obviously, with a bit of rain around, it's tempting to go and throw a granular fertilizer out there, but it's likely to end up in the creek at the moment, which obviously we don't want. And obviously, soil temperatures are quite low with that water. So just be patient. They will come. If you are dealing with a lot of rainfall, then aerating your soil to get some soil oxygen back in there. So if you can imagine, that soil profile is completely full of water, so there's no oxygen in it. That's often why earthworms will come to the surface. You'll see them come up in this situation. So trying to get some some oxygen back in there, because your roots do need to breathe. And if you do have a prolonged period with no oxygen in there, they will start to struggle. Pre-emergence and insecticides are stable if already watered in. So as Mick said, once there's been in there for a few days, a big downpour like this isn't going to wash them away. They are very stable, but as he mentioned as well, you need that dry down for a couple of days before they are stable. Keep off the lawn. Obviously, if you can avoid rain, avoid mowing, please do. When it's super heavy and wet, you're only going to scalp. You're only going to bring on disease. You'll be your own worst enemy there. So, if you do need to raise the height, that's something you need to do. If you are in summer, obviously, as we start to go into summer and things are growing a lot more aggressively, this is where PGR is fantastic in rain periods, because you can sit back and it's not growing that fast anyway, so you're not worrying too much about getting out there and mowing. Delay the renovation processes. Obviously, if you're trying to, if you're looking to core this week, those cores aren't coming out of the ground with all the moisture in the soil. So, if you're scalping and things like that, looking to scalp down, then obviously, not only do we have the rainfall, but we actually don't have any sun. We don't have soil temperatures. So just be patient. Spring will come. I don't know when. Couple of weeks hopefully, but we'll have some good moisture in the soil, and it'll kick off, and I'll be here before you know it. So that's the end of our presentation. So thanks, Mick, for coming along and presenting. Always great to have you on board. Hopefully you'll do another one for us.
Yep. Sure.
Yeah, so for those who want to reach out, obviously, I'm Ian from the Lawn Shed. There's my email address. There's my phone number. You text, send photos, whatever you want. I'd love to get some feedback from today's presentation. We'd love to kind of make this more of a permanent thing or a regular thing. So yeah, love to get your feedback on how we can make it better. And if you've got any lawn questions, be sure to send them through. Thanks, everyone, for being a part of it.
Thanks, Ian. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Hopefully a dry one.
At last.